Hi, I'm Al Gore, and as some of you may know, I'm one of those who's been working to raise awareness of the climate crisis for quite some time. 15 years ago, I was lucky to work with a great director, Davis Guggenheim, and an incredible team of filmmakers on a documentary called An Inconvenient Truth about the urgent need for action on climate. In the years since, we've made significant progress in developing the solutions we need to solve this crisis. But unfortunately, the impacts of the climate crisis are still getting worse faster than we are yet deploying these solutions. But we have the power to change that. We've finally reached the political tipping point beyond which we can unlock real action. In order for us to actually cross this tipping point, we need all of you. By joining us today, you've taken the first step in driving this progress. I hope the ideas you'll learn about here will inspire you to continue taking action in your own community. If we work together, there's a wonderful future ahead of us. So let's get going. Welcome to Countdown.
Live from the Countdown stage, here's Charlie Puth.
Here we are on earth together, it's you and I. God has made us fall in love, it's true. I really found someone like you. Will it say the love you feel from me, or will it say that you will be by my side to see me through until my life is through? Well, in my mind, we can conquer the world. I am glad, at least in my life, I found someone that may not be here forever to see me through, but I found strength in you. I have shown you a brighter day, because that's all that I am living for, you see. Don't worry what happens to me, 'cause in my mind will stay here always and love you and I, you and I, you and I, you know in my mind we can conquer the world, yeah, and love you and I, you and I, you and I, you and I.
Thank you, Charlie Puth.
It's my pleasure, Lado.
I think we're gonna maybe see you at the flip side.
Yeah, you're gonna see me on the flip side.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for sticking around.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm a climate advocate, so I'm very, very excited to be here. And I'm sticking around for the show, like you said. You got one more song out of me. I'll be back in a little bit.
All right.
They told me to go behind you. So
Okay, thanks, Charlie. People of Earth, hello. This is Countdown. I'm your host, Latif Nasser. Some of you may know me as the co-host of Radiolab or the host of the Netflix series Connected, but I'm also a TED speaker. We are coming to you live from the TED World Theater in New York City. Welcome to all of you joining from around this blue-green marble. Whether you just woke up in San Francisco, or you just finished lunch in Sao Paulo, or dinner in Soweto, or if you're watching from your bed in Shanghai, we're all here for the same reason. Our house is on fire, and we need to put it out. Tackling climate change is the issue of our moment. And this initiative right here, Countdown, it's focused on the people, the ideas, the solutions, the actions that we need to set us right. The situation is urgent, no doubt, but as you're about to see, we're still in the game. Over the next 2 hours, you're going to see some heartening examples of innovation and leadership, true stories and honest sentiments that'll give hope, as well as a sense of how each and every one of us can make an impact. You'll hear excerpts from TED Countdown talks by scientists, activists, entrepreneurs, artists, policymakers, business leaders from all over, including from the Countdown Summit in Edinburgh, Scotland earlier this month. Plus, you'll never guess who volunteered to speak up about saving the planet, a bunch of the most talented performers on said planet, including Regina Hall, Rooney Mara, Joaquin Phoenix, Michaela J. Rodriguez, Mark Ruffalo, Forrest Whitaker. Actor Rainn Wilson gathered a bunch of his funniest friends and made something for us. We've also got performances by Dave Matthews, Valerie June, Charlie Puth. As he said, he's coming back to take the stage once again. Now, I know, trust me, I know, that hearing about climate change can sometimes feel, at the same time, like cataclysmic and overwhelming, but then also kind of boring and like homework. Today, we are not going to do that. We're going to do something different. Take a look.
There's a story we've been writing together for hundreds of years.
Oil companies compete with each other.
It's about all of us. It takes place right here. It started for many of us as economies were built. But growth rooted in extracting from our planet and our people came at a cost. There were warning signs. Some of us knew what was happening to our communities wasn't right, that it was connected to something bigger, and the impacts were felt by some more than others. People organized and asked questions. Others tried to understand what was happening and sounded the alarm, even as others refused to believe what we told them, that the planet's climate is changing. Our story has heroes big and small. Maybe you even became a hero in your own way. It's a story of hope, persistence, a plan for a better future. There's also despair, denial, and relentless crises. While there are forces that seek to divide or distract us, we choose to act now. This story has many possibilities. Futures that we write first as neighbors and then as a movement. We are coming together, choosing what comes next and refusing to accept defeat. There is hope.
Know what we need to do and then embrace the technological innovation.
Transforming our world to address the climate crisis isn't just urgent and necessary. It is possible, already underway, and leading us to a better future. Countdown is a global initiative to champion and accelerate solutions to the climate crisis, to turn ideas into action. Because in spite of all the challenges, people never stop trying to shift mindsets and then entire systems.
Investors, they think the future is green.
We have 10 years to change it, so we need to act all together right now.
To change the way we move ourselves and our economy.
Transformation in every global system, from agriculture to retail, shipping to trucking, cement to steel.
And the very foundations upon which we live.
A big detox of transportation is possible.
Electrification will permeate everything.
A phase out of internal combustion engines.
Educating and empowering women and girls is one of the single most important things that we can do to confront carbon pollution.
Everyone must get to a zero carbon future.
When we connect our stories and play an active part, our imaginations are the only limit.
In radical collaboration with each other, we can do this.
And while we're at it, let's make it just and fair for everyone.
No matter what has gone wrong, what can go right?
The solution is to build a new coalition made up of all the groups most affected.
Which story gets in the way of you taking action? Challenge that story.
Our story takes place here. It's been difficult at times and could have unthinkable outcomes. But that was the story we used to tell. Now it's up to us to tell a new one.
Big thanks to Don Cheadle, who is the voice you just heard, and I want to bring in another voice, TED Science curator David Biello. David's been a climate journalist for 2 decades, wrote a book about solutions to the environmental challenges we face. I wanted to have him here for the next 2 hours to kind of break things down, be sort of a cheat sheet for people like me who are not super well steeped in this field. So before we dive in, can you just give us a primer? Like, what do we need to know before we go forward?
Okay, so climate change is this problem where the Earth's average temperature is warming up. That's why you sometimes hear it called global warming. Why is it warming up? Well, it's because of these little things called greenhouse gases. They're called greenhouse gases because they trap the Earth's heat, just like the greenhouse in your garden, right? It's warmer in there. So you'll also hear this kind of wonky phrase called decarbonization, and that's because most of the greenhouse gases have carbon in them. So we got to get rid of the greenhouse gases, we got to decarbonize. And the main way we're going to do that is by putting no more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than we take out, and that's called net zero.
Net zero. So we're counting down. That's what Countdown is all about, counting down to net zero
You got
emissions. Got it. Throughout the show, you'll be seeing parts of TED Countdown talks that'll help frame the problem in a way that even I can understand, and that can provide a blueprint for what our future could look like. Here to introduce our first set of great big green ideas is a great man whom you likely know for being big and green, Mark Ruffalo.
Hi, I'm Mark Ruffalo. I became an environmental activist when energy companies wanted to frack for gas near my home in upstate New York. And I learned how doctors, scientists, and members of my community were coming together to protect the water from contamination. It seemed overwhelming at the time, but I also realized that something could be done, that I could actually join the fight. And that's the message that I want to share with you today. That despite the scope of the climate crisis we're confronting today, there is hope. Climate change does, it threatens the overall health of our planet, but people are actually coming together in neighborhoods all across the globe to solve this crisis. It is more urgent now than ever that governments and industries actually listen to the people and take decisive action. But there are many paths forward, and there are actually things that we can do today to help. We're at a critical crossroads, but the choices that lie ahead of us, there are real opportunities. And we as a global community have never been better positioned to fight this crisis. We have the knowledge, we have the innovation, and we have the technology, we have the financial means. Now, all we need is a collaboration and a commitment to show up for each other for the future that we want to create. And these next TED Countdown speakers are here to remind us of just that together we can find a global, local, and personal solution to forge a path forward for a healthier tomorrow. Take a look.
Touchdown anywhere in the world, and you'll hear more tragic stories of climate devastation. Droughts, floods, wildfires, lives and livelihoods in jeopardy, tipping towards catastrophe. And yet, despite it all, I still have hope in our human family. And you might ask why. It's our capacity for human endeavor to survive against all odds. One that created the extraordinary promise of the UN Paris Agreement and its power to drive the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for people and for planet. We know that the promise of Paris aims to limit global heating to 1.5 degrees to ensure that we survive as a human family. To get there, we know exactly what we must do. We must decarbonize the global economy by 2050 by way of halving the emissions in this decade. We must make coal history, with coal phased out in rich countries by 2030 and in other countries by 2040. The G20 produces 80% of all greenhouse gas pollution, and so they too must, these 20 global leaders, take responsibility and lead. We must stop spending trillions subsidizing fossil fuels, clogging the lungs of our people and destroying forests and oceans. And we must provide the resources that are needed for a just, green, and blue transition. We know that these are all essential ingredients to fulfill the Paris Agreement. Now, try to reimagine with me what this journey to net zero emissions could look like through another lens. One that puts our focus on investing in people to reach their potentials while protecting our home, planet Earth. Decarbonization, a powerful vehicle for climate action, but also for delivering on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
We need to change the way we think about the climate challenge, because things are different this time. We need to stop thinking about it just as a problem, which it obviously is, and start thinking about it as an opportunity, which will motivate us to solve it. I'm a venture investor. I invest in early-stage companies and technologies, and I see tremendous opportunities in solving climate change. That said, we've been here before, and it's different this time. We can reduce net emissions to zero, and that was not obvious even just 10 years ago. Why do I think it's different? Because we have cheaper inputs, we have better technologies, we have better policies, we have a better sense of urgency, and most important of all, we have even better people working on it.
How do we shift out of despair, out of denial, towards something radically different? There's a quote in Spider-Man, "With great power comes great responsibility." Yet what if the opposite is true? What if it's really, with great responsibility comes great power. This is something that all of the world's movers and shakers have known to be true. They weren't born leaders. They simply decided to make themselves personally responsible. Now, solving climate change is not your responsibility because it's outside of your control. What you are responsible for is the thing inside your control, indeed the only thing that has ever been inside your control, your mindset. We all have stories running on repeat, stories that immobilize us, stories the world impresses upon us in boardrooms and classrooms alike. I'm just one in 7.8 billion people. I'm too small to make a difference. I'm not smart enough. I don't have the experience. I'm not the expert. The system is too broken, our leaders too short-sighted, our society too shackled to the status quo. These stories paralyze us. Rewriting them is the single most powerful thing any one of us can do for the planet and for ourselves.
What's the plan, John?
The plan is to transform society.
And what do you mean by that, transform society?
I thought you might ask that. There are 6 big objectives. We're going to electrify transportation, which means stop using diesel and gas for our vehicles. We're going to decarbonize the grid with wind and solar and nuclear. Third, we're going to fix our food systems, and that includes eating less meat and dairy, reducing food waste, and improving our soil health. Fourth, we're going to protect nature. That's stopping deforestation, protecting our oceans, protecting our peatlands, our grasslands. Fifth, we're going to clean up our materials, how we make things like cement and steel. And then sixth, we're going to have to figure out ways to remove the carbon that remains, that stubborn residual effects of emissions that cannot be eliminated. Every one of these 6 things is a major challenge. We've got to attack them all at once.
We have 85% of the solutions that we need. Record lows of solar and wind prices means deployments around the world. The dropping cost of lithium-ion batteries means we're seeing more electric vehicles. But those solutions alone won't get us to net zero. And so we're going to have to both deploy and invest in the now, as well as invent the new. So we need the now and the new. We need to scale up what we have, as well as invest in the future.
Climate change amplifies inequities. Those who suffer the most have done the least to cause this problem. And what that means is that the U.S., as the world's historic biggest emitter, must decarbonize first. We've got to do that for 2 reasons: to show the world that it's possible and to drive the costs down for everyone else. Individual actions are needed and expected, but they are not going to get us where we need to go in this, the decisive decade, when we have to cut emissions in half by 2030.
The good news is we can do this. We have the knowledge. We have the technology. We know it makes social and economic sense. And when we succeed, we can all take lungfuls of fresh air. We will be saying hello to healthy lifestyles and resilient economies in livable cities. We are all on this journey around the sun together. This is our only home. This is our mission, to protect our children's future.
Thank you to Mark Ruffalo and all those TED Countdown speakers. David, I know a lot of people see climate change headlines and it just kind of feels like the same thing over and over. Why is this moment different?
So one big reason this moment is different is because the science is ever more clear. We know more. And another reason this moment is different is because we know where the problem is coming from even more. So we're burning too many fossil fuels, that's coal, oil, and gas, and we're cutting down too many forests to feed ourselves. But because we know where the problems are coming from, we know also how to solve them. We got to get off the fossil sunshine, trapped in those fossil fuels, get off that fossil sunshine, and get on the fresh stuff.
I'm sure many of you who are watching have questions for David too. You can put them in the chat below, or you can tweet them using the hashtag TEDCountdown. And actually, to get ahead of what I expect some of those questions are going to be, so much of the story of climate change is the story of carbon and the story of carbon above us in the atmosphere. The TED team made this gorgeous explainer to help parse it all out. So take a look.
The air we breathe has changed. The mix of gases is shifting with more and more greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. And this shift is happening faster each year. In fact, concentrations of CO2 have reached levels never before breathed by humans since Homo sapiens evolved. In just a few hundred years, eons of fossilized sunshine have been burned as coal, oil, and gas. The exhaust has transformed the entire atmosphere and ocean. It's like a pollution blanket, and the result we know as climate change. So how much more of that fossilized sunshine can we burn before further destabilizing the Earth's systems? Not much. Think of it as a carbon budget. We are currently adding 55 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere every year. This is the Gigaton Challenge. By some estimates, at that pace, we will have burned through the remaining budget by 2030. So to give us some room to breathe, the world must reduce greenhouse gas pollution by more than 7% each year, every year of this decade, starting now. There are a number of ways to do that. Let's start by looking at the greenhouse gases themselves. CO2 makes up nearly 75% of the pollution emitted each year. There's also nitrous oxide, known as laughing gas, but it's no laughing matter, seeping out of farm fields and elsewhere and making up 6% of the problem. And then there's methane, which you may also know of as natural gas. It's 17% of the total. There are other greenhouse gases, but these three make up the bulk of the climate challenge. All must be reduced, and fast. Methane is better at trapping the sun's heat, which means cutting methane pollution is a necessary and fast-acting stimulus for our carbon budget. If methane emissions from agriculture and the oil and gas industry can be eliminated in this decade, we might be able to stave off catastrophes like the loss of the Arctic sea ice and glaciers all around the world. CO2 has a longer life. Once it is added to the atmosphere, it can stay up there for hundreds of years, if not longer. CO2 emissions must be cut in half by 2030, and then reduced even further by 2040 to put the world on a path of adding no more CO2 to the air by 2050. And that means transforming the modern world as quickly as possible. There are several ways to break down the sources of greenhouse gas emissions. Here, we're using the public Climate Watch data. Start with energy. The majority of modern energy comes from fossil fuels, which makes the energy sector 76% of the climate challenge, including the fuels used for transportation, industrial processes, and agricultural production. The shift to clean energy must be accelerated by an order of magnitude if we want any chance to restrain global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we'll need more ways to store this clean electricity, whether that's putting it in the chemical bonds of a battery or into a molecule of hydrogen. Batteries and clean hydrogen are also going to play a key role in cleaning up transportation, which accounts for 17% of climate-changing pollution, including the use of energy to move people and goods around. 8% from cars, 5% from trucks and other heavy-duty vehicles, and 4% from shipping and aviation. With abundant clean electricity, the world can win the race to electrify cars and create cleaner, alternative fuels for trucks, ships, and even one day, airplanes. Then there are our lifestyles and the materials that make them possible. That's everything from the cement and steel that go into buildings to the plastic fibers in fashion. All told, these materials account for 6% of our emissions, on top of the energy emissions required to produce them. And we'll need new and clean ways to make them or replace them. Farming and animal raising also have to change, as agriculture accounts for 12% of greenhouse gas pollution. That means everything from how and what people eat to how and what cows, chickens, and pigs eat. It also means finding ways for farm fields to go from sources of greenhouse gas to places where greenhouse gases get buried. Agriculture is also the biggest direct impact people have on the plants, animals, microbes, and fungi that share this planet with us. To truly solve the climate challenge, the wild world will have to be protected and restored to allow all of life's myriad forms to flourish. A halt in cutting down forests, burning peatlands, and converting coastal wetlands could prevent the release of nearly 5 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases each year. Restoring nearly 200 million hectares of degraded forest land, peatland, and wetlands could also absorb almost another 4 billion metric tons. Perhaps even more importantly, the ocean has vast potential to help reduce greenhouse gases if we protect it. Finally, there are technologies being developed to draw down CO2 from the atmosphere because we have already emitted too much. But very few of these machine forests have been deployed, and they are too expensive to scale up faster right now. This is the climate challenge we face. Going from adding 55 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases to the air each year to adding 0 by 2050 at the latest. The countdown begins now.
Now, David, I'll be honest, like I just find it so hard to conceptualize this, like 55 billion metric tons, like that's a heavy thing, of greenhouse gas, that's a light thing. So if it's a lot, it has to be a lot of a light thing to make up that much of heavy. But like, so that's a lot. And then we have to get half of that by 2030, none of that by 2050. Like for a lot. Is that even possible?
Look, it's a big problem. I'm not going to lie. And honestly, we're not going in the right direction. That 55 billion number is still growing. So it's getting to be a bigger problem. But the reality is, climate change is already here. We have all the tools we need to address this problem. So yes.
Yes, but it sounds like getting to that yes it's going to take a mighty effort. Thank you, David. Now let's welcome an amazing activist and leader, the Reverend Lennox Yearwood, President and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus.
Climate justice ensures that the injustice of the climate crisis, meaning that those who have benefited from fossil fuels for years and decades, that the injustice that was caused upon their community, that is being caused upon their community, that they can find justice, that they can find resolve in regards to the aspect of changing from fossil fuels to clean energy, the aspect of when they are dealing with energy poverty in their community, when they're paying more for the utility bills, that they can transition to clean electricity standards in their community. Climate justice means also a just transition, so that when we transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, that we transition in a way that helps all communities, that we don't prop up this system of white supremacy or this system of colonialism that takes away the power from those communities. But we do it in a way that allows for all communities to be lifted up. That's the most amazing part about this crisis. The most amazing part about this crisis is that it brings us all together. Black, white, brown, red, male, female, straight, gay, theist, atheist, humans. This crisis has forced us to bring all of us together. And the only way that we win this crisis is if we all come together. If we don't come together as humans, we lose. And so that's the moment that we're in. That's the word that we have to get out there, that we can solve it together, but divided, we fail.
Thank you, Reverend Yearwood. Climate change does affect literally every person on the planet. And racial injustice, poverty, mass migration, natural disasters, even pandemics, these are all connected, and climate change is making all of them worse. Now, this is the spot where I usually start to spiral into despair. And so to pull myself and all of us out of that, I'm going to throw to a man who is either the funniest climate activist I can think of or the climate activistiest comedian I can think of, Rainn Wilson.
Greetings, people of the TED universe. It's me, Rainn Wilson. And listen, I reached out to some of the funniest people on the planet and asked them this very interesting and challenging question.
Is there anything funny about climate change?
Is there anything funny about climate change?
Is there anything funny about climate change?
There's so much. It's hilarious. I mean, rising seas and crops failing and forest fires devastating huge tracts of the earth. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
I personally think that humor could be found in absolutely anything. I think with a subject like climate change, it's a lot tougher because it's a serious matter, but there's definitely humor in there. And I will give you an example. Okay, something funny about climate change. Give me a second.
My hometown of Duluth, Minnesota is going to be the new Monaco. What was once a punchline, I tell you, is now a place of refuge from the fire tornadoes. Yay, Duluth, Minnesota!
I live in New Jersey, so we got the Jersey Shore, which will sadly be washed away.
Here's the thing, I am in Mississippi right now, and I came outside so that I could make this video.
And there is the funny image of, everybody's watched Jersey Shore and seen those people with the fist pumping spray tans since they were 9 years old. And then they'll get washed out to sea, flopping around like orange butterfly humans with their spiky hair protruding from the surface of the water like shark fins, and everybody fighting to survive. So that makes me laugh.
It would be funny if I had a heat stroke and died while making a video about the climate. That would be funny. I hope that doesn't happen.
Okay. Wait, no, that's not funny.
Okay, so they didn't really answer the question, but we'll bring back Rainn and his friends later to try again. Now, here to introduce key moments from this next group of TED Countdown Talks is the founder of the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative, Forrest Whitaker, everyone.
Hello, I'm Forrest Whitaker. Climate change is the defining global challenge of our time, affecting every continent, every country, and every person. Scientists tell us we need to dramatically reduce emissions and make the world net zero by 2050 or sooner. But what does net zero mean exactly? As we've heard, we're currently pumping 55 billion tons of planet-warming greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane into our atmosphere each year. That's 7 tons for each person on the planet. The largest source of those emissions globally is the burning of coal, gas, and oil for heat and electricity. Other sources include transportation, industry, buildings, and agriculture. Once up in the atmosphere, those gases don't dissolve, they accumulate, progressively creating a pollution blanket that warms the planet. If we don't take action, rising sea levels and extreme weather events will wreck economies and displace millions of people. Inequality and poverty will be reinforced around the world, causing in turn upheavals and eventually armed conflicts. In the work of my foundation in some of the most vulnerable places in the world, I've seen firsthand the devastating consequences that climate change can have on our communities. But we can reduce emissions to ensure that we're not contributing more to the atmosphere than we and nature can take out. That is net zero, and it's central to getting us out of danger and on the path to a better, healthier, peaceful, more equitable future. These next TED Countdown speakers will share innovative solutions from around the world to both reduce and remove greenhouse gases. Whether it's innovative social organizing or cutting-edge technology, we need all hands on deck.
Climate policy and agreements, they're complicated. But what's simple is that the majority of emissions that are trapped in our atmosphere today, well, they come from three products: oil, gas, and coal. For decades, our countries have been negotiating targets. But behind our backs, the fossil fuel industry has been growing production and locking in further emissions. I started reaching out to climate policy experts from around the world because I wanted to understand what frameworks exist to negotiate who gets to produce what and how much. What policies help governments regulate, constrain the production side of fossil fuels? I found out that very few do. We have more than enough fossil fuels in existing installations, even if we stopped expansion today, of oil, gas, and coal in existing projects to use while we carefully manage a phase down. And so the world is spending its intellectual, its financial, its technical capital to dig up stuff that we know we can't burn. And if we do, it will burn us. So what do? A year ago, a group of academics, advocates, scientists, and former diplomats came together to create the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, to create the missing framework so countries can negotiate a wind down of fossil fuels in a way that is fair, in a way that is equitable. So here's the good news. Support for the treaty is growing. Every day, I'm so excited to turn on my computer. 101 Nobel laureates, including the Dalai Lama, have endorsed the principles of a fossil fuel treaty. Cities from around the world are passing motions at their city councils to endorse a fossil fuel treaty. Sydney, Barcelona, LA, Vancouver. Over 100 elected officials from around the world, from 20 countries starting in the global south, have endorsed the principles of a fossil fuel treaty. Over 2,000 scientists have now endorsed the principles of a fossil fuel treaty. Indigenous leaders, youth groups, over 800 civil society organizations who have been fighting fossil fuel projects for decades are now calling on their governments to negotiate a treaty to keep it in the ground. A fossil fuel treaty will help us wind down the production of fossil fuels. It will provide a complement and help us achieve the goals of the Paris Accord. It is a big, bold, new idea. But at this moment in history, we need some big, bold, new ideas.
In the time it took me to walk on stage, around 10 seconds, more than 10,000 metric tons of climate-warming gases have been pumped into the atmosphere from human actions. 99% of this pollution is carbon dioxide, CO2, and we know we need to reduce it. The other 1% is almost entirely methane, which mostly comes from producing fossil fuels, managing waste, and raising livestock. But that 1% of methane could cause more warming over the next 10 years than all that CO2. This is because methane absorbs a lot more energy per unit mass for reasons relating to its molecular structure and its ability to form other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. CO2 is important because it can linger in the atmosphere long after it is emitted, which means we must achieve net zero emissions to eventually stabilize our climate. This is key for protecting generations to come. But with climate change already devastating so many lives today, we can't focus only on the distant future. My work as a scientist aims to identify ways to slow down warming as fast as possible so that we can lower the risks of worsening damages in the near future. This is where methane comes in. That 1% of methane may cause more warming than all that CO2 in the next several years, but it only lasts in the atmosphere for around a decade. Methane's warming power is therefore not from the gradual buildup over time like CO2, but almost entirely from recent emissions. This means that every time we reduce methane, we can reduce a lot of warming right away. In fact, cutting methane is the single fastest, most effective opportunity to immediately slow down the rate of warming. And this is because not only does methane act fast, but because we can act fast, because we have the technologies available right now to cut methane emissions from human activities in half. And even better, many of these solutions pay for themselves.
Pasture is the single largest type of land on the surface of the earth today, thanks to our taste for meat and dairy. Just over a quarter of all land is used for livestock. That's more than forests or farm fields or anything else. Most of that land is best for ruminants, such as cows, that can digest high-fiber feed, such as grass and straw. However, the process by which grass and fiber is broken up in the stomachs of cows and other grazing ruminants has a byproduct, methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Despite what you might have heard about methane in cows, most of the methane is actually burped out, not to the back end. And that represents about 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year, or more than 4% of our annual global greenhouse gas emissions. We have a methane problem from cows. So how can we reduce these methane burps? My colleagues and I may have found a solution. Seaweed. So how does it work? Some seaweeds contain ingredients that directly inhibit microbes in the cow's gut from forming methane without interfering with food digestion. The amount of methane produced is dependent on how much the animal is eating and what's in the diet. And as such, previous efforts to reduce methane emissions focused on changing the diet or improving forage quality. And we do have potential solutions other than seaweed to reduce methane emissions. Molecular additives to feed, such as 3-NOP, reduce emissions by about 30%. Even garlic and citrus extract can reduce methane burps by over 20% without affecting animal health and productivity. Now, you may ask, why not stop eating beef and drinking milk? That would be a good question. So, adopting a plant-based diet with supplements may help shrink a person's carbon footprint in high-income countries like the US. But for the rest of the world, these foods are needed to provide key nutrients such as vitamin B12 and vitamin A, which are critical for brain function, for vision, and immunity. These are found almost exclusively in beef and milk. All we need now is for governments to step up and facilitate the use of these methane-busting feed additives. Cattle industries in some countries have already committed to climate neutrality by 2050. But if we can get these feed additive innovations into cow stomachs earlier, we can cut methane burps significantly. Given that methane only lasts in the atmosphere for a decade or so, we could even slow global warming in the short term.
About 600 million people in Africa still don't have reliable access to electricity, and energy shortages are still a part of daily life. Africa needs energy, a lot of energy. But the question is, what kind of energy? In 2013, the government of my country, Ghana, began consultations to construct a coal plant, a 700 megawatts coal plant meant to be sited at Ekonfi district, a coastal fishing community in the central region of Ghana. In Africa, job creation and economic opportunities are their priority. And those were the same arguments that were made by those who were in support of the project. They claimed that the project or the coal plant would have created jobs for the local youth and also expanded the economy of the country. But we know that coal is the most polluting form of power generation. We are also aware that from a purely economic point of view, coal is cheap. But that is only true when we ignore the non-economic impact of coal. Ghana and Africa need energy, but we don't want coal to be that energy. We managed to shut down the coal plant, and we didn't want coal to be part of the country's energy system. Our experience shows that resistance is possible. How? By bringing into the conversation the adverse impacts and externalities of coal plants. Secondly, also by providing clean alternatives. And more importantly, by involving the local communities, because they're the first to be impacted, and they must also have a say in the conversation. In the last decade, technology has moved at a fast pace. It has lowered its cost dramatically. Africa can and must develop with all the energy it requires without incurring the disastrous impact of coal, i.e. health and environmental consequences. Development and clean, breathable air must not be mutually exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you to Forrest and all of those speakers. Coming up, we have more talks from the TED Countdown stage, and we'll be hearing again from Vice President Al Gore, plus Michaela J. Rodriguez, Joaquin Phoenix, Rooney Mara, performances by Valerie June and Dave Matthews. Now, David, listening to excerpts from those talks, it's clear to me what corporations need to do, what countries need to do, but the thing that trips me up is what does that have to do with me? I'm just one guy. I'm just a small fry. Does anything I do matter one way or the other, for better or worse?
Well, first of all, so all those entities that you mentioned, corporations, countries, they're made up of individuals. So of course what you do as an individual matters. You may think of yourself as a small fry, but I think of you as somebody who maybe works for a corporation, and maybe you can push that corporation to take more climate action. Or I think of you as a citizen, as a voter. Maybe you can vote for climate-aware candidates and push them to take stronger climate action, faster climate action. You're also a member of a community, a family member. Maybe you're a dad, a brother, a son, probably all those things. So have those conversations with your family members. Talk about climate change, because that's the only way we're going to get this done.
Thanks, David. You make me feel important. If you want to find out how you can take action, TED Countdown speaker Johan Rockström, who you saw earlier, has partnered with an initiative called Count Us In to help us all be part of the solution. To find out more, go to countdown.ted.com. And it does sound kind of trivial, but one of the most important assets you have is your attention. Talk about what's happening. Talk about it with your family. Talk about it with your friends. Talk about it with your dental hygienist. Circle up with and amplify folks in your community who are working on local solutions. You could even, I don't know, host a TEDx event about it. Take a look.
organizzando un evento countdown nella mia comunità locale perché il rispetto dell'ambiente deve diventare il pensiero naturale per tutti.
أنا أنظم حدث العد التنازلي في مجتمعي المحلي لعدة أسباب، من أهمها نشر ثقافة الدراجة الهوائية والابتعاد عن وسائل المواصلات التقليدية والتي تؤثر بالسلب على المجتمع المحلي وقد تخفف من الانبعاثات الحرارية لدى العالم.
The County of Hawaii is organizing a countdown event to inspire, invoke, and encourage collective action to mitigate the greatest challenge of our time, climate change.
Finding better alternatives to how we live for a safe and healthy environment is not debatable. As a result, I'm organizing a countdown event in my local community.
Organizo Peci São Paulo Countdown, contagem regressiva pelo clima, para poder compartilhar ideias que merecem ser espalhadas relacionadas com esta causa que é tão urgente quanto importante.
Xin chào, Hồng Anh tổ chức chương trình TEDx Countdown với mong muốn mang những kiến thức và lựa chọn hướng đến bảo vệ môi trường và phát triển bền vững gần hơn tới với cộng đồng TEDx Dakar tại Việt Nam.
I'm organising a countdown event for my community because I want to help them understand ways that they can personally make a difference.
Nous allons rassembler les innovateurs, les penseurs, les personnes, les activistes de Bruxelles à propos pour avoir des discussions autour de l'urgence climatique.
Это чрезвычайно важная тема – экоответственность, климатический кризис. Мы, наши дети, неизбежно столкнемся с этим. Нам предстоит жить с этой проблемой, нам предстоит ее решать.
その理由は地元の人が自然が大好きで地球を守るための英知や技術、愛を持っているからです。今はそれをみんなで共有し、行動に移していく時です。
Ma ke aluliki ana o kako e loli ai ka loli o ke ani au.
Scientists agree.
It's real.
It's here.
It's because of us. But there's hope.
We can change climate change.
Join me.
Join me. Join me.
Join me and take action today.
What better world could we build together if we told more stories about our cooperative nature, about our deep connection to the living world? Or if we shared visions of a future not based on Hollywood dystopias, devoid of nature, but instead shared visions of a thriving ecological civilization built on nature's self-organising principles. Every day we tell stories, to ourselves, to our friends, and on our social media platforms. What stories are you choosing to tell? Are they continuing to enforce a narrative of degeneration? Or are they exciting and inspiring others with stories of our regeneration?
I'm committed to fighting climate change.
To solving the climate crisis.
To changing climate change.
Because I care about wildlife.
To honor my ancestors and to protect my kids' futures.
So I can leave a better world for my two little scientists at home.
Because we have no other choice but to fight for future generations.
I am really excited for a green future. I want to see cleaner energies, electric cars. Yes, it's all very exciting.
Everything on this planet shares the same environment, and we need to protect it. By rewilding natural places, we can ensure the wilderness is preserved for generations to come.
This is our time. This is our moment. So I am going to do all that I can do so the next generation can have clean water and clean air.
People of Earth, thank you again for joining us. For those just tuning in, this is Countdown, and we're coming to you live from the TED World Theater in New York City. I'm your host, Latif Nasser. Countdown partnered with Climate Visuals to hold an open call for photographs related to climate solutions. The project received more than 5,000 submissions from over 1,000 photographers in 185 countries. During this next performance, you'll see just some of the eye-popping images that came in. Now, here with her song Astral Plane is singer-songwriter Valerie June.
When we get into a body, we concentrate all of this light and stardust. We humans are stardust. We have this light in us, and we are born to shine in this body. We come in all sizes and all shapes. And we have one job to do in this life, and like I said, it is to shine, and shine fully and completely every single day. But sometimes we forget. We turn on the news and it tells us to forget, and don't shine. But I'm telling you, so that you can remember, shine fearlessly together to protect our planet and our future. Well, is there a light that you have inside you can't touch? A looking glass, it can only show you so much. But if you follow the signs, slowly but steady, don't rush, then that day will come when you're ready. Just trust. You be dancing on the astral plane in holy water cleansing rain, float through the stratosphere, blind but yet you see so clear. Well, is there a way for you to shine without fear? You're from other worlds, but you can't see what keeps you here. Dancing on the astral plane in holy water cleansing rain, floating through the stratosphere, blind but yet you see so clear. Dancing on the astral plane in holy water cleansing rain, floating through the stratosphere, blind but yet you see so clear. Blind but yet you see, blind but yet you see, blind but yet you see, blind but yet you see so clear. Well, is there a way for you to give it your all? You're dreaming a dream of sweeter things, things great, things small. Dancing on the astral plane in holy water cleansing rain, floating through the stratosphere, blind but yet you see so clear. Dancing on the astral plane in holy water cleansing rain, floating through the stratosphere, blind but yet you see so clear. Dancing on the astral plane, holy water cleansing rain, floating through the stratosphere, blind but yet you see so clear. Blind but yet you see, blind but yet you see, blind but yet you see, blind but yet you see so clear. Well, there is a light that you have inside you can touch. Don't forget.
Beautiful. Thank you, Valerie. The climate change mission here at Countdown is pretty simple. Break the problem down, lift the solutions up, and get them out into the real world. Earlier, we heard that the science is clear. We must cut emissions in half by 2030. That's 9 years away, so about the lifespan of a rabbit, not that long. So whether it's new solutions or the ones we've already got, we got to hop to it. Now, even if you don't fully understand the science, and I will be totally honest, I do not, most of us just have to look outside our windows to witness firsthand the dire consequences of climate change. Don't take it from me. Take it from environmentalist and America's weatherman, Al Roker.
Ferocious tropical storms and floods, devastating wildfires and droughts, record-breaking heat waves and cold blasts. I will tell you, as somebody who has covered weather on television for more than 45 years, we've never before witnessed such extreme climate events. And these are not happening just in our country. They are happening all around the globe, and more frequently and more severe. Scientists agree, credible scientists agree, that these events are a direct result of climate change, and that climate change is rooted in human behavior. If we as a global community don't make the drastic changes today, kids who are born today will face a lifetime of climate disasters. Just in the last several years, just in the hurricanes that we've covered, the rapidly intensifying storms that just seem to go on and on, the wildfire seasons that don't end, it is time now for decisive action. We've got to try to stop or at least mitigate climate change, to reduce extreme weather, and most importantly, safeguard the future for our families and our planet. For more on extreme weather, let's listen in to a conversation between David Biello and Vice President Al Gore at the Countdown Summit.
What is extreme weather?
Well, the extreme weather events we have been experiencing in recent years are caused in significant measure by all the man-made global warming pollution that we've been putting into the thin shell of atmosphere surrounding the planet. And that global warming pollution, according to the scientists, trap heat because the Earth gets its energy from the sun, and then some of that heat is radiated back into space in infrared. There's a natural greenhouse gas layer that keeps temperatures within the boundaries that are ideal for the life that has emerged here on Earth. But by thickening that greenhouse gas layer with lots of CO2 from the burning of fossil fuels and methane and so forth, it traps a lot more heat. In fact, we're putting 162 million tons of it every single day using the sky as an open sewer. And the accumulated amount now traps as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 first-generation nuclear bombs going off every 24 hours. That's a lot of heat. And what that does is disrupt the water cycle. The wind patterns are different. The ocean currents are now being pushed in toward new patterns. And since weather is the result of climate patterns that have emerged over a long period of time, when the climate pattern is pushed out of its familiar shape, then the extreme weather events occur.
So dry areas get drier, wet areas get wetter, and you just get so much more water in a shorter period of time.
Yes, the extra heat that's trapped in the Earth system evaporates a lot more water vapor off the oceans. This feeds atmospheric rivers that on average have as much water as 25 Mississippi rivers. And when they reach storm conditions that trigger a downpour, you get a rain bomb, as some people call them, and in some cases kind of an airborne tsunami. And you get enormous amounts of rain, also snow if the conditions are cold enough. And that same heat also pulls the moisture out of the first meter of soil, so the droughts take hold more quickly and last longer. So you get both more droughts and more floods and mudslides.
Anywhere you look all around the world, the extreme weather is happening. Can we expect more of this in future? Is it going to get worse? What happens next?
Well, the scientists have warned us that as bad as these extreme weather events are now, they're nothing compared to what we could experience in the future if we don't stop using the sky as an open sewer for all this heat-trapping pollution.
So what gives you hope that we will do that?
Well, the hope I feel is based in part on the amazing progress that scientists and technologists have made in developing alternatives to the burning of fossil fuel, electric vehicles in place of internal combustion engines, regenerative agriculture that puts more CO2 back into the soil and the vegetation, sustainable forestry to protect the forest areas, protection of the oceans. We have seen the solutions emerge almost like the development of vaccines in record time. We've seen science and technology give us solutions for the climate crisis in record time. But just as with the vaccines, we've got to deploy them, and we've got to straighten out our political dysfunctions in order to deploy them all around the world. We are one world ecologically, in terms of the pandemic threat, certainly in terms of the climate crisis, and we have to deploy these solutions worldwide.
Well, thank you for joining us, former Vice President Al Gore.
Thank you.
A big countdown thank you to Vice President Al Gore for shouting this issue out from the rooftops for decades. And a smaller countdown thank you to the Fieldgate Plaza Mall near where I grew up for selling me a bootleg copy of his groundbreaking documentary labeled An Inconvenient Truth. That's not a joke. That's simply the inconvenient truth. Okay, let's get to some of the people's questions for you. David, we actually had a lot of great ones about electric car batteries, oceans, the impact of climate change on health. We'll cover those, don't worry, in talks coming up. But here, let's just start with the first one I got right here for you. 1.5 versus 2 degrees Celsius doesn't really sound like a big deal. And I can relate, on my thermostat at home, there's not even an option for half degrees. Why does a half degree matter?
That is a great question. Thank you. So one way to think about that is to roll it back. If you went roughly that same amount of temperature down for global average temperatures, we would be back in an ice age. Ooh. So that's the difference between the Earth covered in ice and the Earth we live on right now. So roll it forward, and we've only gone about 1 degree Celsius so far. And we're already seeing more fires, more floods, more droughts, extreme weather, like you just heard about. We got to stop. Every 1/10 of a degree matters. And that's why the difference between 1.5 and 2 is so important. It's not like we fall off a cliff at 2. I mean, I want to be real. But 2.1 is infinitely better than 3, and so on and so forth.
Right. And it's an average, too, I think, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Another question for you, and this makes sense because people are talking from their wallets. Energy prices are rising around the world. Some people blame renewable energy sources like solar and wind. Is that true?
It is not. Spoiler alert. Okay. The short answer to that is it's the reverse. It's actually fossil fuels that are causing the instability in energy prices. You don't have to pay for sunshine. You do have to pay for coal, oil, and natural gas because somebody dug it up. And what's happening, let's take the example of the EU, where they are having an energy crisis. Why are they having an energy crisis? It's not because they built all those windmills or put in all those solar panels and all the other things they've done. It's because they're reliant on Russian gas. And you got to pay for Russian gas. That's it.
All right, if you have more questions for David, tweet us using the hashtag TEDCountdown or put them in the chat below. Now let's welcome an actor, singer, activist who is a member of Climate Power's Creative Council Advisory Board. Here to introduce more ideas from TED Countdown stages, Michaela J. Rodriguez.
Hi, I'm Michaela J. Rodriguez. Food, water, air. These are the bare minimums we need to survive. And they're all provided by the amazing, beautiful planet we call home. But we're destroying it. Actually remember the first time I saw my first natural disaster, and not only was I worried and scared, but I was driven to action. We may not be able to reverse all the damage we've caused, but we can stop adding to the problem by protecting the invaluable resources we have left. We have the ability to transform our wild spaces within the next 10 years, allowing nature to help us clean up our mess and in turn, save millions of lives. We must save the natural world to save ourselves. And these next TED Countdown speakers are here to tell us how.
Today, globally, only 7% of the ocean and less than 1/5 of our land have been protected. That means that we have converted most of our planet into a tame environment, where 96% of the mass of the mammals is us and our domesticated livestock. Only 4% is everything else, from pandas to tigers to elephants. And we have removed over 90% of the large fish in the ocean in the last century alone. On top of the loss of nature, we have global warming. This summer of 2021 has seen some of the hottest temperatures in human history, in places that one would expect to be cool, like Canada, Finland, and Siberia. This extreme heat kills hundreds of thousands of people and fuels raging wildfires, turning towns, forests, and grasslands into ashes, also killing billions of individual animals and trees and many coral reefs around the world. No place is safe anymore unless we rewild our planet. If we are to prevent a global disaster, we need to do two things. As we know, we need to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases to almost zero. But we also need to draw down the excess carbon pollution in the atmosphere and in the ocean. That's why in 2018, I put together a team of top scientists and economists to answer the question of which areas in the ocean we must protect first, and how much of the ocean do we need to protect. To solve that problem, we developed a new framework to optimize multiple benefits. Picking which areas to protect depends on how much we value the different objectives. We found that if we gave the same weight to each biodiversity, food, and carbon, we would want to protect the right 45% of the ocean to maximize the three benefits. We also found that even if we didn't value biodiversity, the minimum amount of ocean we would protect would be 30%. So 30% of the ocean is the floor, the minimum area that we need to protect if we want to preserve marine life and all the benefits it provides for people. Similar analyses have been done for the land, also showing 30% as a minimum. Armed with this research, we at National Geographic partnered with the WIS Campaign for Nature and launched a campaign for 30 by 30, meaning at least 30% of the planet, land and sea, protected by 2030. Working with the governments of Costa Rica, France, and the United Kingdom, we built a high-ambition coalition for nature and people, which now has 66 countries in it and growing, all supporting 30 by 30 as a main target for a global deal on nature. 30% of our planet by 2030. Only that amount of wild nature, together with a massive reduction in carbon emissions, will be able to get us back on track.
What we do know is that the ocean is a vital part of our life support system on the planet. It produces at least 50% of the oxygen that we breathe, so more than 1 in every 2 breaths. It also regulates temperature for the planet. So without the ocean, the poles would be unbearably cold and the equator would be unbearably hot, and it would be a lot harder to live here. Now, we think about saving the ocean from plastic or from oil and oil spills or from overfishing, but really, we should be thinking about how the ocean is saving us. And what is it saving us from? It's saving us from the climate change that we are creating, essentially ourselves. And yet, when we think about climate action and climate strategies and climate plans, we often overlook the ocean and leave it out, because somehow we think that saving the ocean is something else we have to do, not a core part of our climate strategy. And that's what has to change, because the ocean is a core part of our climate system. And so it has to be a core part of our climate solutions.
The climate crisis is a health crisis. It threatens our air, water, food, shelter, security, all the basics on which the human life depends. Burning of fossil fuels for electricity, heat, or transport is a major driver for climate change and a main contributor to air pollution. Globally, air pollution causes 7 million premature deaths each year. That's 13 deaths every minute, way more than the death toll of COVID by the end of summer of 2021. And the poor and the marginalized are more severely impacted. Time has come that we measure the advancement of our civilization through the metric of health rather than metric of wealth. But here also lies one of our biggest roadblocks. It is impossible to have healthy people on a sick planet.
If I stop breathing for 2 minutes, I will die. It is the simplest thing that all of us do unconsciously, about 20,000 times a day. So normal that we forget that breathing is the essence of life. My daughter, Ella Roberta, stopped breathing frequently and was resuscitated numerous times by me at home and in hospital by her doctors, until suddenly, on the 15th of February, 3 weeks after her 9th birthday, she took her final breath. A second inquest into Ella's death, just in December 2020, the coroner, Philip Barlow, he concluded that it was the excessive illegal levels of air pollution not only induced her asthma, but it was the highest ever on the night she died. As a result of this, Ella is the first person in the world to have air pollution listed as a cause of death on her death certificate. Ella's story is unique, I admit, but her experience is shockingly ordinary. In too many countries around the world, air pollution exceeds what the WHO tells us is acceptable to breathe. Fossil fuels, everyone, they're killing us. Almost 1 in 5 premature deaths are linked to air pollution. From combustion engines, coal power plants, wood burning, ammonia, cooking stoves, and other fossil fuels. That is 8.7 million people a year dying from heart attacks, cancer, strokes, dementia, suicide, depression, stillbirths, and miscarriages. And that's just the start. Children are the worst affected due to their lungs still developing. Air pollution stunts the development of lungs and brains. Scientists, believe it, are finding soot in mothers' placentas, meaning unborn babies are directly exposed to the black carbon produced by motor traffic and fuel burning. Like Ella, 93% of children around the world are breathing unsafe air. The real tragedy of this is we know how to solve this public health crisis. We need to shift from toxic fossil fuels to clean, electrified, public and active transport. The second inquest into Ella's death made it abundantly clear. Ella would still be here, alive today, if air pollution around our home had been within the WHO acceptable limits. Air pollution is an invisible global pandemic.
Choking smog, polluted waters, climate change. This has been the environmental cost of the tremendous growth in China over the past 40 years. At the same time, hundreds of millions of people have put themselves out of poverty. As an environmentalist in China, I have witnessed all of this firsthand. The challenge we're facing is, can we clean up as fast and as broadly as the massive development degrading our air, water, and climate? The pressing global climate situation requires each of us not just to do it, but to do it faster. I believe there's a chance for us to succeed, as I know it too, that I've seen work to help reduce the enormous environmental pollution. It is the power of transparency. Pollution information made public using mobile internet and other IT technologies. Then empowers millions of citizens to speed change by holding corporations and government agencies accountable. My team and I have launched a Blue Map for Zero Carbon, a database that means to bring China's long-term national commitment down to where the 10 billion tons of carbon are actually emitted. This is how a zero carbon map looks like. Each province and city is color-coded based on its level of emission. And it's not just carbon. Today, we further expand the Blue Map to cover waste and plastics and even biodiversity so as to empower more people to join this unprecedented global race to zero. The price for winning this ongoing race is nothing less than a better word for this generation and for the generations to come, for mankind and for all the plants and animals that call this planet their home.
Thank you to Michaela J. and those TED Countdown speakers for showing us that we have to protect nature to protect ourselves. Now, here's another powerful champion for the environment and a UN Goodwill Ambassador. Since 2005, he and his band have eliminated over 120 million pounds of CO2 and 500,000 single-use plastic bottles from their shows. Here, with the performance he recorded especially for Countdown, is Dave Matthews.
Hello, I'm Dave Matthews, and I was invited to play a song. Thank you for having me. I was also invited to say something about climate change, although I'm confident that those who are qualified have already said all that needs to be said. But it does seem to be by far the biggest problem facing humanity, facing the world, and we certainly have to do something about it. We have to do everything about it. It should be everything we think about. And then I also think about the fact that if every fish and every bird and every flower and every tree and every human and every little critter, if all of it vanished and left a dead planet that was once beautiful and blue, it wouldn't, not even the moon would notice. The stars certainly wouldn't miss us. Just be a speck of dust that never was. And maybe that's a comfort. This song's called Dive In, and I hope it's appropriate. I saw a man on the side of the road with a sign that read, I will work for food. So I tried to look busy until the light turned green. And I saw a bear on TV 'cause his friends were all drowning. See, their homes were turning to water. A strange kind of sad big old bear. I'm sure he would happily eat me. He could tear me to pieces, that bear. Oh. Wake up, sleepyhead, I think the sun's a little brighter today. Smile and watch the icicles melt away. See the water rise in summer's here to stay. And that sweet summer breeze will blow forever. Go down to the shore, kick off your shoes, dive in the empty ocean. just stay on my knees and keep praying, believing in something. You tell me everything is all taken care of by those qualified to take care of it all. Will they take care of it? So wake up, sleepyhead. I think the sun's a little brighter today. Smile and watch the icicles melt away. See the water rise in summer's here to stay, and all those summer games will last forever. Go down to the shore, kick off your shoes, dive in the empty ocean. Someday you think we'll wake up in a world on its way to getting better, and if so, can you tell me thinking that lately the blood is increasing, the tourniquet's not keeping hold in spite of our twisting. Though we would love to believe that we are not in control. Though we would love to believe. Wake up, sleepyhead, I think the sun's a little brighter today. Smile and watch the icicles melt away. See the waters rise in summer's here to stay, and all those summer girls will dance forever. Go down to the shore, kick off your shoes, dive in the empty ocean.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, that guy's pretty good. Real up-and-comer. All right. Earlier, Rainn Wilson asked his friends if there's anything funny about climate change. Let's check back in with them.
Knock, knock. Knock, knock. Knock, knock. Who's there? Nobody. Because they're all dead. Because of global warming.
Who's there?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs who?
Exactly. They gone. You know, we could be like the dinosaurs. We could be gone like that. Right? That's what I'm talking about. Come on, that's funny, you guys. Knock, knock. Who's this? Climate change. Climate change who? Climate change is largely a man-made phenomenon which the scientific community at large agrees will wreak almost inconceivable death and destruction on our planet unless there is immediate and significant societal change. Get it?
A polar bear ghost walks into a bar and the bartender says, "Hey, get out of here. We don't serve polar bears in here." And the polar bear ghost says, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not real. Because of global warming, we're all extinct." And the bartender was like, "I apologize for the initial hostility, but you gotta admit, kind of hard to tell the difference between a polar bear and a polar bear ghost." Do you get it? Because they're both white. Never mind. Sorry.
Penguins. F*** 'em. It's a flightless bird. How are they not all dead anyway?
Second. Something funny about climate change.
Rainn's gonna keep working on that, and we'll check back in with him later. Now, one of the most heartening things about the last few years has been the way that millions of young people have basically muscled the climate crisis to the top of the global agenda. Their clarity, their persistence, their moral authority is unignorable. Two of them took the countdown stage in Scotland 2 weeks ago. Here's what they said.
everyone. My name is Shia Bastida.
And my name is Shiv Sowen.
And we are a youth of youth climate activists who have been present throughout Countdown. And yesterday, we came together to put together a list of demands that we have for leaders of the world.
We are asking leaders around the world to take the following action. 1, divest from all fossil fuel investments and reinvest in green energy and ensure a just transition led by workers and impacted communities.
2, center climate justice in all key policy decisions, including protection for frontline communities from pollution, as well as from climate disasters.
3, stop all open pipelines and oil and fossil fuel extraction initiatives from Line 3 in the United States to Cambo right here in Scotland, to ECOP in Uganda, and all over the world.
4, hold large corporations accountable for their actions that contribute directly to the climate crisis. This includes paying taxes, having youth at decision-making tables, and last but not least, ensuring a just transition to renewable energy.
5, create policies to protect activists' rights to peaceful protest and safeguard democracy all across the world.
6, remove the economic, political, and social influence of fossil fuel companies from key international decision-making spaces.
To be clear, these listed demands are not exhaustive in what we need to solve the climate crisis. This is the bare minimum.
We find ourselves in a critical moment where we don't have the time to lose on just talking and having conferences that won't amount to real action. Never before have we had a moment that is rooted in science and experience, felt so deeply among all of us. So join the youth in leading.
Join us today. Thank you.
Shiv Sowen and Shia Bastida are here with me now. Shia, you made this point about how this moment is kind of it's a combo of science and experience. What did you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that we have known about the climate crisis in scientific terms for, the past 30 years. But until now, we hadn't really experienced the climate crisis. And now we have that in our memory as youth. My hometown suffered from flooding in 2015 in Mexico. And my roommate in college told me, she had to be on the phone with her parents, talking to them about how to get out of New Orleans because of Ida. So now we, as the new generation, are feeling the effects of the climate crisis, and especially in, marginalized communities, frontline communities, and the global South. So now that is why it's so important for youth to be at these decision-making places, because we bring those stories, and that narrative is what switches people's perspectives. Not just data, but stories tied to that data.
Yeah. And Shiv, can you lay out for me what vision do you have of the future? What do you think is possible?
Yeah, and that's what we were doing at Countdown. We met with a lot of youth activists across the world, and we came up with this list of demands because as young people, we have the clarity to see exactly what needs to be done. What needs to now happen is world leaders need to listen. We need leaders of companies to actually take the action of divestment, reinvestment, and also move our global economy to zero fossil fuels, to renewable energy. Because the way that we're going right now is not sustainable for our generation, for the generations here right now, and for generations to come. We have so much work to do, and that's how we have to get moving now.
Yeah, so you were on that stage, now you're on this stage. There's a big audience out there who, I think a lot of them are probably wondering, how do I get involved in the movement? What do you want to say to them?
Yeah, well, just to start out, Shia and I started working together a few years ago right here in New York City. And the way you can get involved is just by starting in your community and see what actually needs to be done. Whether that's starting conversations with your family, doing something in your school, your local city council, your local state government, anything like that. Any small action where you're actually making your voice heard and really holding those who have power to account, that is what's going to make the change.
Yeah, and for Glasgow, for COP26, that I'm headed to right after this.
Your bags are packed right over there.
They're right packed. We are actually organizing a global climate strike on November 5th. So wherever you are in the world, you can join this global climate strike on Friday. And then on November 6th, the COP26 coalition is also organizing a mobilization. So for people who can't make it on the 5th, they can make it on the 6th. And that direct action of going out into the streets not only shows governments and companies that we are serious about change, but they also show them that, you know, people together cannot be defeated, and it empowers us to be part of this movement.
Wow, thank you so much, Shiv and Chia. Now, to guide us through another batch of TED Countdown Talks are two actors who deserve as many accolades for their activism as they've received for their work on screen: Joaquin Phoenix and Rooney Mara.
We are in a true planetary emergency, and most people don't know that the #1 contributing factor to increasing global temperatures is the way that we fuel our homes, our businesses, our modes of transportation, and our bodies. Now we are going to have to transform all of these systems in a massive way, and soon.
All of that can feel very overwhelming, but for us, being vegan is a privileged choice that we get to make every day, multiple times a day, that we know will make a huge impact. There are so many decisions that are made that are outside of our control that affect our lives and the planet, but this is one thing that we do have control over that we know will make a difference.
Yeah, if any of us are going to claim to truly care about the planet, then we can no longer ignore the role animal agriculture is playing in destroying it.
This challenge actually presents an immense opportunity for innovation. We are witnessing some truly incredible leadership in this fight for our planet. Let's hear from these TED Countdown speakers about both the giant scale of change that is needed and some of the ways in which industries are transforming to meet our climate goals.
Thank you.
Today, the world generates about 25 trillion kilowatt hours of electricity each year. Most of that is from fossil fuel power plants. And the dominant mindset is that we have to change the current electricity system by replacing those fossil fuel plants with clean generation. So this is great. We can replace all our fossil fuel plants, have a clean version of today's world, walk away, we've solved climate change, thank you very much. Oh, but I did forget one tiny little detail. We actually need 5 times that much. To be clear, we need, and we're on track to have 2.5 times today's amount of clean generation to switch to a clean version of our current electricity system. But changing the current system isn't enough. We need 5 times that, all of it clean, or 12 times today's clean electricity production, to actually avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Our project is not changing the current global electricity system. Our project is building a new global electricity system. Political action that tinkers around within the current system will never get us where we need to be by 2050. Arguments over which sources of clean electricity we should use are unhelpful. We need all of them: hydro, solar, wind, nuclear, advanced geothermal, mandates for carbon capture on remaining fossil plants. If you look at the potential rates of addition for each of these, you'll see we need everything as much as possible, and we may still fall short. It's not changing the electricity system. It's building a new electricity system, one 5 times bigger than today's total system and 100% clean. This mindset goes beyond electricity generation itself. Many people are wary of ambitious climate action because they see the project as changing the familiar current world. That's not it. Addressing climate change means building a new world, a world in which energy is healthier, doesn't pollute the air we breathe, and where it's cheaper and everyone globally has access to it. A world with higher incomes, longer and better lives, greater equality. A better world.
Now, when you think of the industries most responsible for climate change, you probably summon up an image of an oil rig, right? Maybe even a coal mine or a mega farm, perhaps heavy engineering. But there's one industry that's never mentioned in that list, even though every other industry depends upon it. I'm talking about an economic sector that makes nothing. It has no stock, no warehouses, no factories. It's entirely powered by brains, by spreadsheets, and by PowerPoint. Who is this mystery industry? The professional services of advertising and PR firms, the big management consultancies, the corporate lawyers, and lobbyists. Together, this sector is worth over $2 trillion a year. Let's call it the X industry, where X is for influence. The brain print of the X industry is felt everywhere. And that's because these problem solvers and storytellers act as the grease in the wheel of all other businesses on Earth. And that gives the X industry an outsized influence on the likelihood that we reach net zero, or they will be one of the primary architects of climate destruction.
More than 9% of CO2 emissions globally come from transporting goods around the world. So, what is the dream? In 2018, the management team of A.P. Møller-Mærsk, the global shipping company I lead as a chairman, made a commitment to make the company carbon neutral by 2050. For some people, 2050 sounded like a long time into the future. But in fact, this was a very ambitious dream for a shipping company. To be carbon neutral by 2050, we needed to invent a zero-carbon container vessel by 2030. Because then it would take roughly 20 years to replace all of the 750 vessels that we operate. So the dream was truly big and really inspiring. But to be honest, in 2018, we did not know how to do this. We had to work hard on the details. Less than 3 years after our big dream, we have found a solution. It is called Power-to-X. Now, Power-to-X is not a new technology, nor did we invent it. It is a combination of known chemical processes to convert green electricity to a green fuel. First, you convert the green electricity from solar or wind to green hydrogen. That is done through electrolysis. And then the green hydrogen can be converted to various types of green fuels through chemical processes. The benefit of Power-to-X is that it produces a green fuel that is liquid at normal temperature and can be used in a combustion engine. So instead of spending 20 years to replace all of our 750 vessels and create a big pile of waste, we believe we can retrofit existing vessels by adding a combustion engine designed for green fuel. And with that, achieve zero carbon shipping much, much earlier.
Today, among investors, there are a lot of questions about decarbonizing portfolios and how to achieve net zero. But when I think about the intersection of climate and capital, I'm always asking myself, what effect is this really having on the ground? Because there could be a profound difference between investing just to protect your assets from the effects of climate change and actually investing to prevent those effects from coming about. Because what the world really needs is real decarbonization. We need to decarbonize the old economy that we have and invest to create the new economy that we need. It needs to be an economy that emits no more than it can remove, and that does this in a way that is net positive for the planet and the people. Estimates suggest that it will cost $3 to $5 trillion a year between now and 2050 to achieve net zero. Just to give you an idea of how much that is, it would be like investing the entire GDP of Germany or Japan every year, annually, for 30 years. So financial capital has a huge role to play in our shared success or our shared failure.
By 2100, the world will have a population of almost 11 billion people. That is 3 billion more people than the planet houses today. To house all of those people, we need to build about 2.4 trillion square feet of new built space. We are already experiencing severe impacts from climate change. How can the world house another 3 billion people? And how can their housing needs be part of the solution rather than part of the problem? I believe that the answer is hiding in plain sight, that there is what I call a Goldilocks scale that sits between the scale of housing and towers, 2 to 3 story housing that should actually look very familiar to most of you because we built the most beloved parts of our cities with it. The row houses of Boston, the Hutong districts of Beijing, most of the fabric of Edinburgh. This Goldilocks framework hits the sweet spot between the number of people it can house and the amount of roof area we need to provide them and their communities power. It can be built out of simple local materials like wood or brick, both of which have relatively low embodied energy and can be built by local workers. And the solar panels up above could be supplemented with state-of-the-art battery systems that level out solar supply and user demand. We can have electric, state-of-the-art air conditioning and heating systems. This exists today. This housing could compost food scraps and solid waste and turn it into usable soils or protein for animal feed. And I think most importantly, this kind of housing could provide affordable, communal, equitable housing for communities in dire need of it. And I work with a lot of these communities, and I know how much demand there is for this out there. I want you now to imagine with me that we deployed this Goldilocks framework in 2 places that I love dearly, New York and Calcutta. Very different places, but they have these big booming downtowns, but they also have these growing outskirts that experience a lot of sprawl. So they have sites like this that are near mass transit. But imagine if on these sites, we, instead of building sprawl, built this Goldilocks framework. Now, that would manifest in 2 very, very different ways, different materials, different cultural expressions, but it would give us carbon-negative, transit-rich, joyous places for people to live and raise their families. So yes, we can go to 11 billion people. We don't need to fear our neighbors. We don't have a lack of land or technology. We just have a lack of vision because the answers are hiding in plain sight. Thank you very much.
Meat eating is linked to climate change. Eating animals and animal agriculture is the leading cause of rainforest deforestation. Meat production is a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions. There are so many reasons to eat plant-based, and any reason that resonates with you is the best reason. I understand it's not always easy, but eating even 1 plant-based meal a day makes a huge difference. I used to be a long-time meat eater as a regular chef. I used to cook lots of meat and never made that connection that they're living beings just like us with feelings, emotions, and families. I'm now on a mission to unleash the mighty power of plants to create foods that we crave, full of flavors and textures that are more nutritious and better for us and the planet. I believe in compassionate action, and the way I express that is through cooking and developing amazing recipes that inspire and teach people how to make and eat delicious foods without animals. Vegan food for meat eaters and vegans alike. Because like most people, I want to save the animals and the planet, but there's no way that's going to happen if I have to compromise on taste.
We're living in a decisive decade, one that years from now, your kids, their kids, even just random kids down the street are going to ask you about it. What did you do? How are you involved in one of, if not the biggest story on the planet? Did it have anything to do with a live stream you watched hosted by a certain lanky, overeager podcaster? You're gonna wanna have something to tell those kids. Get involved, take action. One way to do it, head to countdown.ted.com. Still to come, Regina Hall presents more inspiring TED Countdown talks, plus Conan O'Brien, Aisha Tyler, and Margaret Cho weigh in on whether climate change can be funny. And we've got another performance by Charlie Puth. Up now, TED Countdown speaker Monica Araya is here to tell us about an exciting project called Drive Electric. It's raised over $500 million, billion with a B, dollars to do this work. You can learn more at driveelectriccampaign.org or by listening to this from Monica.
Hello, my name is Monica Araya, and I'm a campaigner at Drive Electric. So if you think about it, right now around the planet, there are around 1 billion cars circulating everywhere. And that is not even counting buses, trucks, motorbikes. And only 1% of that stock is zero emission. Only 1% is electric. So our campaign is about making sure that we electrify everything we can: trucks, buses, cars, fleets, and of course we need fewer cars. So in essence, we're trying to go much faster, and the next 5 years are critical. Our campaign basically brings together 70 groups around the planet, and this coalition is growing. We're fundraising $1 billion because we need to make sure that all these activists, all these organizations have funding. Some will work with cities, some will work with politicians, some will work with companies. We have to normalize the idea that after a certain date, we cannot sell any more petrol and diesel cars. We are saying no more sales of dirty buses after 2030, 100% of zero-emission cars by 2035 for passenger cars and vans. And then when it comes to trucks, we have to give them a little bit of more time because the technology is still expensive, and we're saying 2040. There are many misconceptions, and to some degree that's normal. One that comes often in the conversation is that if you switch to an electric car, that is going to be worse for the environment because of the batteries. And we have lots of research that shows that if you have a life cycle analysis of the battery, it will have an impact for sure. Everything we produce has an impact. And yet, the impact, the environmental impact of a fossil fuel car is way bigger. I would say that the one that worries me the most is the perception that electric mobility is an elite agenda for people with a lot of money. And that is probably happening because people link e-mobility with a Tesla, which is, a premium car. And to some degree, it's understandable. And yet, I would really like us to think about the drivers of a public bus, the driver of a truck, the driver of a taxi that has to every day get all that pollution in their lungs, all that noise is always there. And when you talk to them, they will tell you they will never go back to the polluting technology. At the same time, we know that, for example, diesel truck pollution hurts vulnerable communities, low-income neighborhoods the most. It hurts everybody, but it hurts the poor disproportionately. So working on electrification is also a matter of justice, is also a matter of increasing air quality, improving air quality, and to the extent we link those two agendas, climate and justice, we will realize that electrification is actually very good for people.
everybody, I am Prajakta Kori and I'm committed to changing climate change because I love our planet. I think it's beautiful and I think it's just unfortunate that I haven't seen a lot of it. I've seen a tiny bit of it and I want to explore it and I want the coming generations to see it and see what a beautiful place we are born on. But I love our planet and I will do everything that I can every day to make sure that we change climate change. So join me and take action today.
I'm Mitch.
And I'm Greg.
And we are ASAP Science.
We are committed to fighting climate change because we are viscerally experiencing it ourselves. We're from Canada, specifically Ontario, and this past summer there were horrible wildfires that were really surprising for us. We'd never really seen them before. And it's just, Ontario is where we live, and it's a beautiful part of the world that I've never thought this would happen in, and I'm just honestly kind of scared.
And I think also we are viscerally aware that we are privileged people from a privileged country that's disproportionately affecting the climate crisis. So it's our responsibility to take that on ourselves.
We're also science communicators. We read science all the time. We're science teachers, and science and the climate crisis are completely linked because we're using scientific evidence to understand what's going on, but we're also using science to figure out the solutions.
Once again, people of Earth, grateful for your attention. Thank you for coming. I'm Latif Nasser. This is Countdown. Welcome to those of you who are just joining us from wherever in the world you may be. We are coming to you live from the TED World Theater in New York City, talking about solutions to the climate crisis. And a lot of today's speakers have outlined a realistic pathway towards a cleaner, more just future. Here to introduce more ideas from the TED Countdown stage is actor and activist Regina Hall.
Hello, I'm Regina Hall. Humans across the globe have so much in common. We often share the same goals: health, security, happiness, opportunity, prosperity. If we are serious about expanding access to all of these for more people, we must address the climate crisis immediately. The most severe impacts of this crisis are felt first and hardest by the poor and vulnerable. Ironically, those who have often done the least to cause it. We must act together, near and far, across the oceans and within our communities. We are only as strong as the most exposed among us. I come to this topic via my work on women's health and rights. I know that the way we treat our planet is equally important to the way that we treat our bodies. And sadly, women often get the short end of the stick. It's time to change this once and for all. But how do we do that? We can start by listening to voices from around the world, including and especially those young people leading the way for future generations. Leadership comes in all shapes and sizes, and the best leaders inspire others to step up too. As we've witnessed during our current global pandemic, we all have to play our part to overcome it. The same is true about the climate crisis. So here are some great leaders from around the globe. Maybe they will bring out the leader in me and the leader in all of you.
Today, many of us are getting involved at a younger and younger age. 16-year-olds, 15, 14, 10-year-olds are out on the front lines, missing school, drafting manifestos, organizing demonstrations, bringing governments and corporations to court, refusing to wait until we are older to start making a difference. But being a change maker is not something anybody has on their bucket list. It isn't something kids aspire to become when they grow up. It's something that just happens. Something activates you. An experience, an injustice that takes place. big or small, local or global. And then there is almost no choice but to get involved. In the last few years, I have spent more time in other students' classrooms than in my own, sharing principles of leadership, sustainability, and change-maker skills. And I can say with confidence that young people are aching for skills and knowledge that will allow them to act effectively today. Real change can start in the classroom, but the classroom has an increasingly distant relationship with reality. I think it is high time to ensure that what we learn in the classrooms reflect what is happening outside of them. And to ensure that every single student in every corner of the world has at least 1 hour a day of mandatory lessons about the climate crisis, the 17 SDGs, and about any sustainable innovations, about the realities of today's world, from kindergarten through to graduation, and I mean mandatory. I strongly believe that every young person can be a change maker, but often they need help knowing where and how to start.
At just 12 years old, I witnessed the devastating impact pollution was having on Iran, my parents' home country. On one of my summer visits, I witnessed smog so heavy it completely blanketed the air, obscuring the stars I wanted to trace out of the night sky. I decided to read more about climate change in Iran, and I became increasingly alarmed, particularly when I learned the fact that temperatures in the Middle East were rising more than twice the global average. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront my relatives. But I was shocked when they informed me that they knew almost nothing about climate change. So I began to dig into the lack of climate education in Iran, and I found a study that read only 5% of Iranian students could properly explain the greenhouse gas effect. As I continued to scour the internet for more information, I began to connect the dots. From what I could see, there was a severe lack of climate resources available in Farsi, Iran's native language. Now, my story is anecdotal, but the fact that the vast majority of scientific research is only available in English is a big problem when it comes to climate change. Because most people in the world don't speak English. In fact, 75% of them do not speak English at all. In an effort to close the climate translation gap, I decided to start Climate Cardinals, an international youth-led nonprofit working to make climate education more accessible to those who don't speak English. We work with over 8,000 bilingual student volunteers who translate climate information in exchange for community service hours. In just over a year, we've translated hundreds of thousands of words of climate information into over 100 languages, including Yoruba, Somali, Swahili, and Gujarati. If a ragtag group of teenagers that congregate through social media can do this work, imagine the impact that a concentrated effort by governments, scientists, and policymakers would have. Groups of people that are being disproportionately affected by climate change deserve to have access to the resources they need to make sense of these disasters that are destroying their communities. The more people are informed about the climate crisis, the greater chance we have to coordinate collective efforts in protection of the future of our planet. Because every single person in the world, every single person in this room has the power to further climate action. So we must engage people from every country, young and old, to join the fight for climate justice. English cannot be the barrier to entry.
Meet Sumini. Sumini is the leader of Indonesia's first woman-led ranger team and a mother. A conservationist whose action is rooted in her community on the edge of the Loiser ecosystem. In the patriarchal society where she operates, a woman is expected to be quiet and subservient. During a village meeting, the ladies tend to congregate in the kitchen while the men discuss village policies and budget. And oftentimes, even if she is present in the meeting room, she is expected to not voice her opinion, rather letting a male relative to answer questions addressed to her without consulting her first. When I asked Sumini why she chose to protect and conserve the forest, she said, "We are mothers and grandmothers. We are responsible for everything. From the moment we wake up, we have to wash clothes, cook, and make coffee for our family. More than anything, we need water in every aspect of our life. And the only thing that protects our water source is the forest up the mountain." The path for Sumini to lead these rangers is anything but straightforward. She became familiar with the forest when she began accompanying her husband trekking. During these trips, they witnessed encroachment and logging. They saw people taking out timber and encroaching into the forest. Logging and encroachment that happened upstream soon turned into disasters downstream. A heavy rainfall that lasted for a few days turned into flash floods and landslides, destroying the village and its essential infrastructure. After the disaster, Sumini and other villagers had to take refuge in a shelter for a while. Being a refugee is hard. You don't have privacy and security. You don't even have the access to clean flowing water. It's hard to even keep yourself safe and clean. I don't want that kind of disaster to happen again, she said to me. We need more women in the position of leadership. Women from the grassroots. Women like Sumini.
Nosotros como pueblos indígenas hemos venido luchando a esa tierra por miles de años porque tenemos mucho amor y respetamos. Por eso es importante que escuchen nuestras voces, nuestros gritos, nuestros lloros, para que no vaya más a perjudicar en nuestra selva, porque ustedes no están escuchando. Más del 25% superficie de la tierra está protegido de los pueblos indígenas. Esto incluye casi la mitad del bosque del mundo. Cobre es para nosotros un extraño que no valora, que no tiene conocimiento hacia los bosques. ¿Qué significa bosque para nosotros? Para el pueblo guaraní, el bosque significa es nuestra casa, nuestra vida, lleno de conocimientos. Tú puedes caminar, ahora puedes caminar, estoy viendo yo alrededor las plantas que podemos comer, las hojas que podemos curar, bejuco podemos utilizar para nuestros canastos, para cargar, madera para hacer construir la casa, buena madera, las hojas para dolor de cabeza. Pero si yo traigo a un cure no va a pensar como yo estoy viendo. Cure no tiene ese conocimiento, piensa que ahí es un regalo, un lugar de recursos, están sacando. La palabra cure no tiene que ser malo. Ustedes son capaces de tener ese valor, el conocimiento que tenemos nosotros como pueblos amazónicos en general. Pueden aprender, pueden respetar, pueden aliarse con nosotros. Yo pediría a ustedes, para llegar, los pueblos indígenas en general, hemos tenido un amor profundo, un verdadero respeto por miles de años a esa selva. Pero tampoco no puedo enseñar toda esa etapa para que ustedes sepan qué es el respeto, qué es la conexión con la tierra, con el espiritual. Lo que yo pido es que respeten. La Madre Tierra está esperando que respetemos. La Madre Tierra no está esperando que salvemos nosotros. Y nosotros como pueblos indígenas esperamos lo mismo.
Why is it so hard to change the direction of our civilization. I'd like to suggest that what's missing at this point is not more facts and information or even technology. We have more than enough. What's missing is insight. My teacher, Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, has said that if we haven't yet changed our way of living, it's because the awakening isn't strong enough. We can't hope to change the world if we can't change our own way of seeing things, our consciousness. But how can we do this? In the Zen tradition, we know that awakening doesn't happen only with the intellect. We need to engage our whole being right in the heart of the present moment. And a very simple way to do this is with the practice of mindful walking, a powerful meditation that doesn't require hard labor or even extra time. Do you remember the first steps you took outside this morning? The feel of the ground underfoot, the fall of the light, the quality of the air. Do you remember the first tree on your way? Life is there for us, but the question is, are we there for life? Perhaps this morning we had something more important to do. Perhaps we were in a hurry. Many of us have a feeling that we are running out of time. But when we rush to do something, are we saving time or are we losing it? There is a lot that is urgent. But in order to take the kind of radical, decisive action that our planet is calling for, we need to be fully present, grounded and alert, fearless and free.
There are notable, powerful stories of leadership out there at all levels, from small communities to the global stage. And one lesson I take from the stories we've heard today is that it can be hard, really, really hard, to have hope in the face of a challenge this big. But we just have to choose optimism, and we just got to show up for each other. We'll be seeing more environmental leaders at a very important event that starts tomorrow. It's called COP26, and we've invited some experts and friends of Countdown to tell us all about it.
COP26, the Conference of the Parties on the Climate Treaty, is where every nation in the world comes together to negotiate collective action to solve the climate crisis.
COP26, which is the one that is coming up now in Glasgow, is the 26th time that these governments are getting together to do, frankly, follow up to the Paris Agreement. They need to come to the table to report to each other what they have done since Paris, and most importantly, commit to each other what further efforts they're going to do over the next 5 to 10 years, the most decisive decade in the history of humanity.
Well, the first thing with COP26 that the average viewer should find out, there's a lot of acronyms. So unfortunately, there's one right now, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, did a report that said that we had 12 years. Now that was 3.5 years ago.
And COP26 is also a COP that has been affected, I would say positively, by the last two IPCC reports. Science spoke very loudly in October 2018 with the IPCC report on 1.5 degrees, and just a few months from today, we received this sixth report in August that was named as a Red Code for Humanity. Those two reports are allowing us to understand the importance of following science and the big risk that we have in front of us if we don't follow the science as is indicated in those reports.
The commitments that are going to be made at COP26 are critically important because they will tell us whether we're on track to the goal that has to be reached by 2030, which is cutting global emissions from where they are today to 50%.
The language is not everyday language, and it is the job of us as activists to be communicators of the science and of the decisions that happen behind these walls. The involvement of youth is really important because we bring the element of urgency. And I think that including Indigenous voices is critical because Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous philosophy of taking care of Mother Earth as a reciprocal action is part of the paradigm shift that we need to achieve.
Every one of us can and must deliver actions at different scales. Not only political leaders, business leaders, financial institutions, everyone that has a capacity of taking a decision, those decision makers, they have the unique opportunity of being part of the most important challenge that we have ever faced as a species.
I hope that you don't lose hope. I pray you don't lose hope. I've seen some of you want to check out. Don't check out. Don't give up. Don't give in. Fight to the end. Whatever you do, keep fighting for this planet.
It's going to be a busy 2 weeks in Scotland. A lot is on the line. Let's take a look at another question we got for David. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. This is from Nitesh Patel. What are the new technologies being introduced to reduce carbon emissions from industries?
Ooh, I love this question. This is a great question because this is where the hope comes in, right? So there are now new technologies that allow us to produce green steel using electricity or hydrogen instead of coal.
Damn.
There are new technologies to turn cement, you know, the thing that's building this building right here, from a carbon source into a carbon sink, so trapping that CO2 in cement. And then we're also starting to develop, let's call them mechanical trees, technologies to pull carbon out of the air. And it's sort of a blend of the natural and the technological because you're harnessing geology to pull that CO2 back out. You're just speeding up the natural processes with these machines. So those are some of the things that get me excited.
So you're saying cyborgs. The solution are cyborgs.
Yeah, something like that.
All right. Finally, it is time to find out if Rainn Wilson and his friends ever found anything funny about climate change. Let's take a look.
Is there anything funny about climate change, given the extreme weather we've had in recent years, that there are still some people who claim it's a hoax? Yeah, that's hilarious.
What's funny about climate change? Nothing. Nothing is funny about climate change.
Climate change is like really not that funny, which is kind of funny.
I get to sit around my house in my underwear. I swear to God, I'm in my underwear. I'm not going to show you, but I am.
I was desperately looking for Al Gore's movie on the environment, and I walked into a section of a store which was selling old DVDs. Do you have an inconvenient truth? They said, yes, you're fat because you eat too much.
My mom used to say to me when I was messing with something that I shouldn't be messing with, you're gonna with it till it breaks. And that's what we've done with climate change, with this planet. We have with it till it has broken. Can we put it back together the way that I promised my mother I could put things back together when I was a little kid? All I needed some super glue in a couple of hours to completely reassemble this precious heirloom vase that you've had since you were a young woman that I broke pretending to, do some kind of martial art that I made up in my head. Yeah, no, I don't know. I wasn't able to fix that vase.
Climate change kind of reminds me of Game of Thrones when they're warning everyone, winter is coming, winter is coming. But everyone in King's Landing, all the hoi polloi is like, oh, I wonder what's happening with the Lannisters and the Starks and the Targaryens.
And we just continue as though we're just dancing on the Titanic as it sinks.
Well, guess what, people? Summer is coming, and it's coming hard. That's what she said.
I think anything that happens once I'm gone, not my problem. But then I got children. That's the part that makes it rough. Yeah, That's the killer for me, I think. I got these kids and I want them to have kids and I'd like the species to continue, so if it weren't for that, global warming would be hilarious.
Is there anything funny about climate change? No. It's a very serious matter. I'm serious. I mean, it's funny that some people don't think it's a serious matter, but that's not like funny like haha. It's like funny like what the
This was a rough experiment. I think we may have just proven empirically that there is nothing funny about climate change.
Okay, fine. Maybe there's nothing funny about climate change. Let's fix it.
This is the process, but I'll find something. Just give me a second.
Thanks to Rain and all his friends for bringing the fun today. Now we'd like to share another voice from the Countdown Summit earlier this month. She's a poet, activist, artist, Naima Penniman.
I wonder if the sun debates dawn some mornings, not wanting to rise out of bed from under the down feather horizon. If the sky grows tired of being everywhere at once, adapting to the mood swings of the weather. If clouds drift off, trying to hold themselves together, make deals with gravity to loiter a little longer. I wonder if rain is scared of falling, if she has trouble letting go, if snowflakes get sick of being perfect all the time, each one trying to be one of a kind. I wonder if stars wish upon themselves before they die, if they need to teach their young how to shine. I wonder if shadows long to just for once feel the sun, if they get lost in the shuffle not knowing where they're from. I wonder if sunrise and sunset respect each other even though they've never met, if storms have regrets, if volcanoes get stressed, if compost believes in life after death. I wonder if breath ever thinks of suicide, if the wind just wants to sit still sometimes and watch the world pass him by, if smoke was born knowing how to rise, if rainbows get shy backstage, not sure if their colors match right. I wonder if lightning needs an alarm clock to know when to crack, if rivers ever stop and think of turning back, if streams meet the wrong sea and their whole lives run off track. I wonder if the snow wants to be black, if the soil thinks she's too dark, if butterflies want to cover up their marks, if rocks are self-conscious of their weight, if mountains are insecure of their strength. I wonder if waves get discouraged, crawling up the sand, only to be pulled back again to where they began, if land feels stepped upon, if sand feels insignificant, if trees need to question their lovers to know where they stand, if branches wave at the crossroads unsure of which way to grow, if leaves understand they're replaceable and they still dance when the wind blows. I wonder where the moon goes when she is in hiding. I want to find her there and watch the ocean spin from a distance, listen to her stir in her sleep. Effort give way to existence.
Thank you, Naima. Oof, that last line, effort gives way to existence. David, before we go, what are the takeaways you want viewers to watch from everything they've seen today, to think about as they leave?
Well, we've seen so many great talks, but I think climate change is real. It's here, it's happening now, and it's us. We're doing it. That's the hope, though. Because we're doing it, it's not hopeless. We know what we need to do to change it. We get to decide what future we want. Is it going to be worse, or how much better can it get?
Right. Well, thank you, David. Thanks to all of our incredible speakers. What we need now, though, is not more speeches. It's more action. Starting on a personal level. Switch to LEDs, ride public transport, eat less meat and dairy, then go bigger. Businesses you buy from, politicians you vote for, your employer, your neighborhood, speak up so they can hear you. Join forces with others who are doing the same. This is doable, so let's do it before it does us in. Thanks for watching, and now once again to take us home, Charlie Puth.
Thanks, Latif. I'm here today because I myself am very passionate about Countdown's mission to create a world that's safer, cleaner, and more just for everyone. We all can help. The Count Us In campaign lays us out steps everyone can take to start making positive changes for our planet. You can visit countdown.ted.com to find out more. Finally, before we go, I want to leave you all with one more song. Here is my song, Attention.
Throwing that dirt on my name, 'cause you knew that I'd call you up. You've been going around every party in LA, 'cause you knew that I'd be at one. I know that dress is karma, perfume regret. You got me thinking about when you were mine. Now I'm all up on you, what you expect? But you're not coming home with me tonight. You just want attention, you don't want my heart. Maybe you just hate the thought of me with someone new. Yeah, you just want attention, I knew from the start. You're just making sure I'm never getting over you. Run around, throwing that dirt all on my name, 'cause you knew that I'd call you up. Baby, now that we're ready to stand face to face, you already know that you won. Ooh, I know that dress is karma, perfume regret. You got me thinking about when you were mine. Now I'm all up on you, what you expect? But you're not coming home with me tonight. You just want attention, you don't want my heart. Maybe you just hate the thought of me with someone new. Yeah, you just want attention, I knew from the start. You're just making sure I'm never getting over you. What are you doing to me? What are you doing, love? What are you doing to me? What are you doing, no? What are you doing to me? What are you doing, no? What are you doing to me? What are you doing, oh? You know that dress is karma, perfume regret. You got me thinking about when you were mine. Now I'm all up on you, what you expect? But you're not coming home with me tonight. You just want attention, you don't want my heart. Maybe you just hate the thought of me with someone attention. I knew from the start. You're just making sure I'm never getting over you, over you. What do you do? Attention. I knew from the start. You're just making sure I'm never getting over you. Ooh.